Hello, welcome to another episode of FortiGuard Live. I'm Derek Mankey, and as always, Aamir, this is a pattern that we're repeating. It's good to see you again.
Hey, always good to be back.
Yeah, it's been a while since we talked, but I know we're on the front lines every day. You're looking great, by the way.
Hey, thank you. Getting some sleep, getting some rest, and enjoying some time at home.
Yeah, it's amazing you're able to do that in between all this stuff, because I know it's been as always, it's a crazy day in cyberspace, as we like to say. Right?
Hey, but those are the days we live for, right? Those are the days that keep our job exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about that. I always get excited when we talk strategy, and we've talked a lot about things like e-commerce lately, holiday threats, all these different things that come up seasonally, and that's something actually that because we see patterns and trends, we can actually think ahead of the curve and try to be proactive on when it comes to proactive defense. Right? It's there's always various sides to security strategy. You have incident response and reactive, which is necessary and critical, has to be agile, but there's plenty of opportunity to also be proactive. And oftentimes there's not enough focus on that. So I wanted to talk today about, some things that we can do to be a little bit more proactive in our everyday lives, particularly when we talk about security operations centers. So a lot of the times, security controls and solutions are put in as compliance or checkboxes, and that's fine. But a lot of the times it's just also when an incident does hit, it can be scrambly, right? There's fires to put out, and obviously there's incident response and things like that. But from a blue team perspective, I think there's various things that we can do to empower the blue team. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm glad you brought these subjects up about being proactive, because as fun as it is for us to research all the attacks and all the dark side, it's also a lot fun to really figure out how to stop these attacks and what the techniques are to stop these attacks. And you mentioned blue team, and I'm a big believer of blue team exercises, blue teams in corporations or organizations, because what a blue team is doing is it's basically trying to actively run tests, trying to actively run defenses on how to stop attacks before they occur. Normally, blue team, red team exercises, they work really well together, where you have someone running an attack, you have someone looking at the IOCs or other types of telemetry that may be coming to a system, figuring out how to stop that attack or what that attack is doing. But it all comes down to like education and understanding the environment, the cybersecurity environment for that organization.
Yeah, and so you mentioned a couple of things like the red team, blue team exercises. That's great, because a lot of the times that's using known attacks, right? So things that we've learned from the past, exploits that we've seen before as an example for pen testing, all those sorts of things we can put in. But there's also the being aware of the live environments, right? Like what's happening out there, and that's one thing I want to talk about with playbooks. As you know, with FortiGuard Labs, we've put out various playbooks. One of the reasons we're doing these is to try to understand as much as we can about malware campaigns, attackers, so that we know their TTPs, techniques, tactics, procedures. The holy grail, the ultimate quest is to get to the who they are, what's their next plan and move. But to get there, we really need to also build out those playbooks. One of the latest playbooks that we've released as an example is on JavaScript RAT. I think you're aware of it. Maybe you can just talk a little bit, a high level about that. And to me, one of the cool things, the reason that we do this is the more that we dig into this, the more we understand how not only they're trying to target enterprise and consumers or public sector as an example, but also they're looking at us. They're looking at security vendors and trying to see how they can try to remain undetected as long as they can and persistent. And this is a reason we have to map all this out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So Derek, I remember when I was a kid, and even still now, I love video games. And I remember used to spend hours and hours on like trying to get through a video game. And then sometimes I used to go get the video game playbook, and I said, oh, you didn't have to go for that 9 levels. You could have just turned around and gone backwards or done something, and you're at the end of the game. And I'm like, wow, someone actually went through the effort of mapping everything out. And that was so cool to me. And I think the idea of cyber playbooks is kind of the same thing, is that someone has mapped out not only the attacks and what the attacks do, but the technique behind those attacks, and also the transfer protocols, the initial access, how they maintain access, kind of all the IOCs and all the tactics around those attacks as well. And so someone's kind of done that work for you. They've created that map and they're ready to go. That's like pretty awesome. I mean, as a defender, as someone that has to take care of networks, now I know what to look for instead of guessing like, okay, like which wall can I walk through? Like in a video game, I know exactly what wall is the secret entrance and what to look for. And I can make my tools look for those IOCs or those attacks. So I'll pause there before I go on to the Java attacks and JavaScript attacks. But if you want to add any comments or anything.
Yeah, no, I think I love the video game analogy, by the way. I had the same thing. I could totally relate as a kid, and maybe even a little bit today too. But you know, like when it comes to the reason that we're doing, if you look at how we're doing these playbooks, I always describe them as the core tool now. I mean, we used to do, you know, well, and not just us, but the industry in general, you know, like, 50, 60 page white papers on a given attack, a whole bunch of things relating to technical indicators, trying to do correlation and describe that in text as an example. And then, it served a purpose and it was good, but I think that we've matured since then. And the reason that we're doing these playbooks is to normalize that, right? There's a lot of reading to do nowadays. There's a lot of noise out there. How do you put that into a common format? And that's what we're doing. Obviously, we're working closely with MITRE and using MITRE Attack to map this to the MITRE Attack framework. And if you look at the attack framework for any given playbook we do, we have to talk about all these things that you're just talking about, right? I mean, being aware, first of all, of the attacker, what's their end game? And then from a blue team perspective, once you understand that, what's the defensive guide, right? You're basically trying to stop them to getting to their end game. And so it really, in a sense of strategy, it becomes, it can be put into analogy with sports analogy. It can be put into video games like you talked about. I remember one of the first conversations that we had was on security strategy, referencing even centuries ago to, Sun Tzu and the Art of War as an example.
Yeah, absolutely. One other interesting point you just brought up is like just the amount of information that's out there to stay ahead. I mean, there's like just tons and tons of reading to do. One of the good things that I like about playbooks is that they categorize like what I need to look for, and I can easily put that into automation systems. So since like our playbooks are using the MITRE Attack framework format, a standard that's used like in multiple industries across multiple products, including all our products, I can easily take those pieces and put them into things like a FortiAnalyzer or something like a SIM product where I can start operationalizing and looking for those specific attacks. And then the good thing about that is, as you said, it's the idea of learning and continuously learning. I mean, we're not all experts. It takes a village, as they say. So the JavaScript attack is a good example of that. It takes a lot of work to figure out how JavaScript attacks work because, first of all, they occur on drive-by downloads. You can just browse a website. They can occur through a web-infected ad network. So there's a lot of ways you can get infected through a JavaScript applet. They're usually dissolvable agents, so it may not be something that shows up on disk to analyze in a debugger. It's in memory. And they have a lot of evasion techniques. You just can't open it up and see it's something bad. You actually have to do a lot of work, a lot of encryption and debugging to figure that out. And when that happens, you're like, wow, I found something. How do I figure out if there's anything more like that? A playbook can help you. It can help you with that guide to go along and figure out more types of the same attack or same techniques that are being used.
Yeah, those are great points. And I want to talk a little bit more because, again, if you look at all the different, this is what MITRE Attack does, again, right? In that framework, it talks about techniques and techniques, that's a new one. Tactics and techniques, both those combined. It's a matrix, right? And it shows, for each different tactic as an example, defense evasion, how are they trying to do that? And again, this old school used to be done in ways of multiple documents and in white papers, like I said. But now this can be put into a common framework. And because of all the great advancements that have been done in terms of threat intel, we have languages like Sticks version 2 as an example that we can encode that information in. So then that playbook becomes living. That's the key thing. It's hard to update a 70-page white paper. It's not so hard to update a couple of elements in a living playbook. that can then be used for multiple outputs. And this is what we're doing at FortiGuard Labs. And I know we've talked about it before, but it can be used to transport through APIs. You mentioned FortiSIM as an example, and SIM integration, but it can also be used for a 2-3 page conversation or brief for a CISO as an example, to understand, for generic malware campaigns or specific malware campaigns, what's that playbook? And then once you understand that playbook, like you said, including evasion techniques, do I have gaps, right? Are they trying to evade certain security measures? Do I have that gap covered? So it's important, I think, to map the blue team playbooks on top of these adversarial ones.
Yeah. The other thing I want to point out is attribution. And I know we're always very careful about attribution. It's always a very, very tricky subject. Yeah. And but when you see the same code and you see the same techniques and the same attack patterns, then you can say sometimes these campaigns are related, even if you can't attribute them to a specific group, right? But attribution is really important if you are looking for types of groups that may be attacking you, or types of attacks that may be targeting your organization. I remember one time you told me you had this analogy where you were telling me how fingerprints are really important in traditional crime, how law enforcement uses that to figure out, like, if a criminal's been from place to place, or if they've had multiple attacks in a city or whatever. A playbook can also be used from that kind of investigative purposes, is fingerprinting the attack and possibly helping with attribution, even though that is still a very tricky subject. It always is going to be.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I think that's fascinating stuff, because you're right. I mean, in essence, what we're doing virtually with these playbooks, even map it. What we talk about in cyber attacks is mapping everything cyber, right? But there's this other layer that even as we work with attribution and law enforcement, it's this whole doorway to the physical world that we also do mappings, right? I mean, there's mappings from our cyber playbooks to those physical people, who they are, to their geolocations, right? Where they operate, what tools they use. And it becomes incredibly important on that attribution piece. And it's what I describe their digital DNA, right? I mean, that's what it is. It's old habits die hard, like we say. They don't change a lot of the time. So by understanding what tools they're using, we can start to identify even different groups that can potentially be operating together or sharing and using the same infrastructure or the same tool. And it becomes really fascinating when you start to put artificial intelligence and machine learning on top of that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, artificial intelligence, machine learning, it used to be a buzzword. People didn't really understand what it gave you. And it started really making automation very, very easy. It started making, categorization very easy. But now it's getting to the point where we can be proactive about defense. We can be proactive around the type of attacks, the type of vulnerabilities that are being targeted. And it can start working with defensive security systems through APIs, through other means as well, to start like pre-blocking or pre-scanning or pre-redirecting traffic in a lot of different ways. So I think we're just starting to see some of the real usefulness of AI and machine learning as policies when they're applied to policies on security devices.
Yeah, and I think last thing I wanted to talk about was this is, I think, actually quite crucial to how we really turn the tide in the war on cybercrime, right? Because we talk about we're always under attack. Everybody, the industry, security vendors, everybody on the good guy side is always under attack. How do you get a step ahead? We talk about resiliency, so creating more. Obviously, that's what we do as a vendor. Good threat intelligence, security fabric, integrated, automated, defense, security, different operations, all that stuff makes it harder for attackers to get in. But the other way is to fight back without necessarily using firepower, right? Because we can't always use weapons. It's illegal to hack the hacker, but we can hit them where it hurts. And that introduces, a risk model, a cost model to them. So that includes the resiliency, but also exposing the playbooks, the attribution piece you talked about, all their techniques, the different tactics, the way that the way they operate. And by doing that, it really forces them to go back to the drawing board. So that's an offense in itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like we call those countermeasures, right? A lot of times in traditional defense, and that is what we're trying to create in the cyber world is countermeasures to figure out what attacks are occurring in real time, and to be able to really make it more expensive for an attacker to attack you, waste their time in a lot of ways. So things like deceptive networking, such as honeypots, or such as a lot of other tools that are out there, will basically waste an attacker's time. It will throw them off. Hopefully, not waste enough time so they're not getting the crucial information that they need, and they'll just hopefully give up. It will force them hopefully back to the drawing board, spending more time and resources. So it's a cat and mouse game, or maybe it'll just give them a different target that they'll rather go after instead of you. So a lot of advantages of doing countermeasures.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just need to do more of it. So speaking of which, we're just scratching the surface right now. We're always short on time, but we have a long road ahead of us. As always, we made great progress. We're going to continue to put out more of these playbooks. That's what we need to do in the industry. The larger coverage of that attack surface we have, the more of that impact we're going to have. And it's to efforts to everybody in the industry and great minds like yourself, Aamir. Thanks for your time again. It's great to talk to you today. This is Derek Menke with FortiGuardLIVE, signing off.